Have you ever looked at someone you once called a friend and realized they were never truly on your side? Not in the quiet way they celebrated your wins. Not in the way they showed up when you were breaking down. Not even in the way they spoke about others when they thought no one was listening. There's a subtle, almost invisible kind of betrayal that doesn't make a loud noise. It doesn't scream or storm out. It stays, smiling, laughing, asking how you're doing, while secretly resenting every ounce of light that rises in you. And if you've ever felt that confusion, that quiet inner ache when someone close starts to feel like a stranger, you're not alone. You've simply begun to see clearly. The truth is, most fake friends don't come with warning labels. They don't walk in with a red flag waving above their head. They come with warmth, with charm, with moments that feel real until they don't. And by the time your soul catches the lie, you've already given away pieces of your peace. But what if you didn't need to wait for betrayal to see it coming? What if you could observe, with calm clarity, the quiet signs that a friend is not who they appear to be? This is where Stoicism steps in, not as some cold philosophy, but as a shield for your spirit. The Stoics didn't just teach us how to survive pain. They taught us how to see it coming, how to stand with open eyes and an unshakable heart. Today, we're going to uncover 6 Stoic truths that will help you identify fake friends, not with bitterness, not with paranoia, but with quiet strength, deep self-respect, and the kind of wisdom that doesn't seek revenge, only peace. These aren't vague theories. They're grounded, practical, and transformative. By the end of this video, you'll be able to spot the signs, protect your energy, and walk forward knowing who truly belongs beside you, and who is only standing there out of convenience. If this resonates with you, if you've ever questioned someone's loyalty or stayed silent while your spirit whispered, "This doesn't feel right," then this video was meant for you. Now take a breath, stay grounded, and let's begin. But before we dive into the truths, if you find value in videos that bring you back to yourself, rooted in ancient wisdom and modern strength, feel free to like, subscribe, and join us here at Stoic Now. This space is your sanctuary. Now, let's walk into the first truth. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Number 1, they disappear when you suffer. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up when you're alone, when the world grows quiet, when your spirit begins to break just enough for the truth to slip through. And in those moments, when your hands are trembling and your heart is tired, you start noticing the absence of people who once claimed to be close. You scroll through your messages and realize that the ones who used to call, used to laugh, used to show up uninvited when things were light, they've gone silent. No questions, no check-ins, no "how are you holding up?" Just nothing. That silence, it's not accidental. It's revealing. It's the loudest form of truth wrapped in quiet distance. The Stoics understood this long before us. Epictetus wrote, "You will know the strength of a friend when you are in pain." And he wasn't being poetic. He was being brutally accurate. Adversity is not just a test of your resilience. It's a spotlight on everyone around you. When life wounds you, it also clears the room. And what's left is what's real. That's the paradox of suffering. It doesn't just crush, it clarifies. We live in a time where friendships are often built on shared fun, not shared silence. People are quick to celebrate your highs, but terrified of standing beside your lows. It's easy to be present when you're glowing, successful, and full of stories. But when your light dims, when your words slow down, when you disappear for a while because life is heavy, that's when the truth begins to leak out of the cracks. Because fake friends are never truly invested in you. They're invested in the energy you bring, the attention you give, the comfort you provide. The moment you stop performing, the moment you become a little harder to hold, they retreat, not because they don't see you suffering, but because your pain reminds them of their own fragility. And they were never equipped to handle it. But Stoicism teaches us not to chase those who walk away from our wounds. Marcus Aurelius, in his quiet strength, reminded himself to turn to their soul and understand what sort of person they are. That's the work. Not reacting with anger, not begging for presents, simply observing with stillness. You start seeing that their silence is not about you. It's a reflection of their capacity. And while it hurts, it also sets you free. Because now you're not confused anymore. Now you're not wondering whether you were asking for too much. You see clearly. You were simply suffering, and they chose absence. Picture this. You lose your job. You're shaken, uncertain, embarrassed even. The news spreads. Maybe you tell one or two people. And in the days that follow, those friends who used to joke with you, ask for favors, tag you in memes, vanish. One of them, finally, sends a quick text. Let me know when you're back on your feet. Back on your feet. As if you were a subscription they're pausing. As if your worth is only valid when you're productive again. That's not friendship. That's emotional consumerism. True friendship, as Seneca believed, is based on virtue, on mutual respect, and a shared foundation of character. It's not about what you can offer. It's about what you represent. And someone who cannot remain present in your pain never truly valued your presence in the first place. But the Stoic doesn't harden in the face of this realization. He doesn't vow never to trust again. He simply becomes precise. He narrows his circle. He learns to offer his loyalty slowly and withdraw it peacefully. No confrontation, no drama, just awareness. Because clarity is the highest form of kindness you can give yourself. This isn't about keeping score. It's about keeping your peace. And sometimes peace means standing in the quiet and acknowledging who's not there, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. You begin to understand that absence can be a gift. It filters out the noise. It reveals who's aligned with your soul and who is only orbiting your light. So the next time you're hurting, don't just tend to your wounds. Watch who reaches out. Watch who listens when you're not talking. Watch who sits beside you, even if they don't know what to say. Because presence doesn't always come wrapped in perfect words. Sometimes it's just a hand on your shoulder, a message that says, I don't have answers, but I'm here. That's real. That's rare. And that's the kind of friendship you protect. The rest? Let it go. Let it fall away without resistance. Let their silence speak. And let your soul walk forward, lighter, not because you've lost something, but because you've finally seen what was never truly yours. This is the first sign. When suffering comes, the mask falls. Who stays and who fades, that's your answer. Now we move forward into a more subtle danger. Not disappearance, but quiet competition, dressed as concern. Number 2, they compete with you, not celebrate you. Sometimes it's not their absence that wounds you, it's their presence. It's the way they smile when you succeed, but the corners of that smile never quite reach their eyes. It's the subtle shift in tone when you share good news. The offhand joke, the sarcastic comment disguised as humor. The energy in the room changes. You feel it, but you don't want to name it because it feels too petty to say out loud. Yet deep down, something in you knows this person is not celebrating you. They're measuring themselves against you. Quietly, constantly, as if your rise somehow implies their fall. And here's the hard truth. Not all friendships can survive your growth. Not because you've changed, but because your evolution reminds them of their stagnation. They see you climbing, and instead of asking how they can grow with you, they start wondering why they feel left behind. The Stoics understood this fragile tension. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But what happens when your thoughts begin to change? When they become more disciplined, more intentional, more focused, and the people around you still think like the past version of you? Suddenly, your new mindset becomes a threat. And that threat wears many masks. Maybe you got promoted. Maybe you started taking care of your body. Maybe you stopped drinking, started meditating, or simply began speaking less and observing more. Small shifts, but those are the ones that rattle the insecure the most. Because every move you make towards self-respect subtly calls out their comfort zone. And instead of reflecting, they deflect. They joke about it. They talk behind your back. Or they compete, passively. They start posting more, bragging more, comparing silently. And every conversation begins to feel like a scoreboard, not a connection. But Stoicism invites us to rise above this emotional noise. It teaches us to anchor our worth internally, not in how others react to us, but in how we respond to their reactions. A Stoic doesn't seek to prove himself. He simply is. He doesn't broadcast his growth, he embodies it. And when someone treats your success like a threat, that is not a reflection of your light. It's a reflection of their shadow. You don't need to dim your flame to make others comfortable in the dark. Still, the signs can be subtle. You tell them you started a new project, and they say, "Oh, must be nice to have time for that." You mention a book you're reading, and they roll their eyes. You hit a personal milestone, and they bring up something they did 10 years ago, as if you need to be reminded that they were once impressive, too. It's not always aggressive. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just tension, unspoken, but constant, and it wears on you. The danger is when you begin to shrink. You start editing your joy, minimizing your wins, avoiding topics that might trigger their insecurity. You keep your growth quiet, not because you're humble, but because you're afraid of making someone else uncomfortable. That's when you know the friendship has become a cage, and you were not born to live small for someone else's approval. The Stoics would say, this is not cause for anger. It's a call for discernment. Envy, as Seneca taught, is the most self-destructive emotion, not just because it poisons the one who feels it, but because it quietly erodes trust between souls. And no relationship, no matter how long it's lasted, can survive without that trust. So what do you do when you notice the competition? You don't confront it with accusation. You acknowledge it with clarity. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to ask, why are you acting like this? You already know. Their reaction is not about you. It's about what your growth reveals in them. And in that space, you have a choice. Continue dimming yourself to fit or outgrow the space entirely. Choose the latter. Always. Not out of pride, but out of integrity. Because any relationship that requires you to apologize for becoming stronger is not one built on love. It's built on imbalance. And imbalance can only last so long before resentment sets in on both sides. You deserve friendships that feel like sunlight, warm, generous, expansive, not mirrors that constantly reflect your flaws, your victories, your effort, through the lens of someone else's unspoken insecurity. So when you notice the competition, don't compete back. That's the trap. Don't try to prove your intentions. Don't over-explain your moves. Just step back, quietly, gracefully, and allow their behavior to explain everything. The Stoic doesn't need to win against others. He only needs to win against his own impulses to react. Because that, in the end, is where peace lives, in refusing to let someone else's ego dictate your path. Now, we've talked about what happens when people compete with you. But what about the ones who only show up when they need something from you? What happens when presence becomes a transaction? Number 3, they only show up when they need something. Not all betrayals are loud. Some walk in with a smile and a question. Hey, got a minute? Quick favor. You're the only one I can ask. And for a while, you don't question it. You want to be helpful. You want to be generous. Maybe even needed. But over time, a pattern begins to form. They don't call just to talk. They don't check in when nothing's wrong. Their presence arrives like a bill in the mail, predictable, one-sided, and always asking something from you. And that's when it hits you. This isn't friendship. This is a transaction. Seneca wrote, "A friend is someone who seeks your good, not your usefulness." Yet modern life has made it dangerously easy to confuse the two. We live in a culture that praises networking, favors, who you know. But Stoic friendship was never about leverage. It was about virtue, mutual trust, the kind of bond that exists not for gain, but for presence. And if someone only enters your life when there's something to be extracted, be it time, attention, money, or emotional energy, they're not a friend. They're a customer. And your soul is not a vending machine. You start to notice the signs. The messages that only come when they need help moving. The sudden calls after months of silence because they just remembered you're good with resumes. The social invites that conveniently align with their need to vent, borrow, or promote something. And when you finally respond with boundaries, when you say no, or not right now, or even hesitate, there's a shift. They become distant, irritated, or vanish altogether. That's the tell. A true friend respects your capacity. A fake one resents your limits. The Stoic doesn't hate the person for this. He doesn't make a scene or launch into accusations. He simply sees the nature of the exchange for what it is, clear, impersonal, transactional. And then he steps away, not in cruelty, but in clarity. Because as Marcus Aurelius taught, the best revenge is to be unlike the one who caused the harm. That includes the harm of emotional manipulation disguised as friendship. Think about it this way. Real friends will check on you with no agenda. They'll ask how you are, even when they don't need anything. They'll show up when you're not useful to them, when you're tired, when you have nothing to offer but presence. That's the difference. That's the standard. But when someone's attention always arrives with a purpose, when their interest in you rises and falls with what you can provide, you begin to feel it, like a quiet drain on your spirit. And if you're an empathetic person, if you're someone who feels responsible for others' well-being, It's easy to excuse this. They're just busy. They don't mean harm. But excuses don't change patterns. And patterns always speak louder than intentions. Eventually, you realize something uncomfortable but liberating. You were never being chosen. You were being used. Not in some malicious, evil way, but in the subtle way people use convenience, comfort, and free emotional labor to ease their own burdens. And every time you made yourself available, they grew more entitled to your energy. Not more grateful, just more expectant. But here's the part the Stoics want you to remember. Your boundaries are not unkind. They are sacred. They are the way you protect your energy so that your presence remains rooted in virtue, not resentment. And when you set those boundaries, when you stop saying yes just to keep the peace, you begin to see who is drawn to your light and who is just feeding off of it. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to send a final message or post a quote online. You simply start responding differently. You slow your replies. You say, "I'm not available right now." You don't over-explain. You don't justify. You reclaim your time as something valuable, because it is. And any relationship that wilts when you stop being endlessly accessible was never rooted in mutual respect. It was rooted in silent expectation. So if you find yourself constantly pouring from a well that's running dry, pause. Ask yourself, when was the last time they poured into me without needing something in return? And if that silence stretches long, honor it. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. You deserve friendships that breathe with balance, that don't feel like emotional chores, that exist not because you're useful, but because you're you. Let the one-sidedness fall away, not to punish them, but to protect your peace. Because the Stoic path isn't about having more people. It's about having deeper people. And sometimes, to go deeper, we must first go quieter. Number 4, they mock your growth or values. It often starts with a joke. Casual, harmless on the surface. You say you've started meditating every morning, and they chuckle. What? Are you trying to become some kind of monk now? You tell them you've stopped drinking, and they raise their eyebrows. You're no fun anymore. You start reading, waking up earlier, moving in silence, spending time alone, and suddenly, the jokes come more often, and the tone becomes sharper. At first, you brush it off. You laugh along, because you don't want to make it weird. You convince yourself it's just teasing. But beneath the laughter, there's a cold edge. And eventually, you realize, it's not that they don't understand your growth. It's that they feel threatened by it. There's something deeply unsettling about outgrowing people who said they loved you. But that's the strange truth about evolution. The more you grow, the more you expose who's comfortable staying behind. And those who are afraid to grow with you will find a way to mock the path you're walking. Not because it's wrong, but because it forces them to see what they're refusing to face in themselves. Stoicism never taught us to shrink. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Growth, real growth, is often misunderstood, especially by those who have confused their identity with their habits. So when you begin breaking patterns, when you start choosing discomfort over distraction, silence over chaos, discipline over indulgence, you don't just disrupt your life. You disrupt the illusion others have built about who you are. And that disruption makes people uncomfortable. So rather than confront that discomfort, they attack it. They mock it. They turn your evolution into entertainment. But here's the thing, they never mock you directly. That would require courage. Instead, they laugh at the lifestyle, the routine, the reading, the changes. Because to critique those things is safer than admitting they're scared to change themselves. That's what's really happening underneath the sarcasm. It's fear disguised as humor. Insecurity wrapped in irony. And when you can see that clearly, you stop internalizing the judgment. A Stoic doesn't allow the noise of others to cloud the clarity of his path. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject." And who knows more about your transformation than you? Who feels the shift more intimately? Who sits in the early morning silence, doing the work? You do. So why let the commentary of someone unwilling to grow define the value of your growth? Still, it hurts. Of course it does. Because these are people you may have loved deeply. People you built memories with. People who once accepted you fully, when you were more agreeable, more distracted, more similar to them. And now that you're becoming something else, something quieter, more grounded, more aligned, they start pulling away. Or worse, they stay close. but use their words to subtly keep you small. That's when you must decide, will I bend to stay acceptable, or will I stand to stay authentic? The Stoics would choose the latter, not out of arrogance, but out of truth. They understood that the highest form of love is to let someone change, even if that means growing apart, and that the highest form of self-respect is continuing your journey even when it makes others uncomfortable. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain why your growth matters. Just live it. Let your life be the quiet proof. Let your peace become your shield. And when they mock, when they laugh, when they question who you're becoming, smile gently. You're not who you used to be, and that's the point. One day, they may understand, or they may not, but your duty was never to convince them. Your duty is to become who you were meant to be, to stay the course, to walk the path, even if it means walking it alone. Because sometimes the price of evolution is misunderstanding, and the reward? Peace, purpose, presence. So keep waking up early, keep reading, keep walking in silence, keep honoring your new values, not for them, but for you. And as you walk further into your own clarity, another test will appear, one that seems harmless, even charming, until you realize it's a window into someone's soul. What do they say when others aren't around? What do they reveal when the person they speak of can't hear? Let's talk about gossip, and what it reveals about those who share it. Number 5, they gossip about others to you. It always starts off casually. You're sitting across the table, coffee steaming between you, laughter filling the air. And then, almost imperceptibly, the conversation turns. A name is dropped, a small complaint, a subtle jab. I mean, she's nice and all, but followed by the kind of truth that was never theirs to tell. You nod, half listening, because it doesn't feel like a big deal. Just two people venting, right? But something in your chest grows still. Something inside knows. You're not just hearing about someone else. You're hearing about the person talking. You're being shown how they speak when love is out of the room. Stoic wisdom reminds us that character is revealed not in how we act when people are watching, but in how we speak when they are not. Epictetus said, "Be silent as to services you have rendered, but speak of the favors you have received." In other words, when your words leave your lips, let them be rooted in humility, not judgment. Let them build, not destroy. But when gossip enters the conversation, it doesn't build anything. It erodes, quietly, slowly, and not just the reputation of the one being talked about, but the integrity of the one who listens. The truth is, gossip is rarely about the subject. It's about power. It's about subtly reminding you of who's in and who's out. It's about creating small alliances through shared criticism. And if someone brings gossip to you easily, comfortably, often, don't be fooled. You are not the exception. You are the rehearsal. The moment you step out of alignment, the moment your path no longer serves theirs, your name will fall just as easily from their tongue. You don't need proof. You only need to observe patterns. Are they constantly dissecting others? Does every conversation turn into a review of someone else's life, choices, flaws? Do they speak with bitterness masked as concern? Sarcasm disguised as insight? The Stoic watches this not with judgment, but with clarity, because a person who dishonors others in private will eventually dishonor you in public. It's just a matter of time. What makes gossip so seductive is that it feels like connection. It gives the illusion of intimacy, like you're being trusted with inside information. But it's counterfeit closeness. It's not trust. It's toxicity wrapped in transparency. True intimacy is built on presence, on mutual respect, on loyalty that exists even when you're not in the room. And any connection built on tearing others down will eventually crumble beneath the weight of its own smallness. When you're grounded in Stoic principles, you begin to guard not just your words, but your ears. You stop entertaining conversations that leave your soul feeling hollow. You stop laughing at jokes that punch downward. You choose silence over participation, not because you're better, but because you're becoming clearer. Marcus Aurelius asked himself, "What is my nature? And am I living in alignment with it?" That question applies here. If your nature is to become peaceful, honorable, wise, what place does gossip have in your energy? Why give space to conversations that dim your own light? And it's not just about avoiding the gossipers. It's about asking the harder question, have I ever been one? Have I ever spoken about someone's pain like it was entertainment? Have I ever repeated a story that wasn't mine to tell? Stoicism is not about appearing virtuous. It's about becoming ruthlessly honest with yourself. And part of that honesty is recognizing when your own tongue has drifted into darker places. But when it comes to others, let their words teach you what their smiles can't. If someone constantly gossips to you, don't try to correct them with lectures. Don't moralize. Simply remove yourself. Change the subject. Distance your spirit. Because the soul that honors others behind their back is the one you want beside you. And the one who uses words like weapons, even if aimed at others, will eventually turn that blade toward you. Let their speech be your signal. You don't need confrontation to create distance. You only need to remember that not every person deserves access to your spirit. And while it may feel cold to step away quietly, the truth is, it's a form of self-respect. One that honors the kind of friendships that speak life, not death. Wholeness, not wounds. And when you start walking away from gossip, you notice something else. Your own mind becomes lighter, less distracted, less entangled in narratives that were never yours. And slowly, you return to yourself, to your path, to your peace. This is the fifth sign. The way someone speaks about others is never just about others. It's a mirror, a roadmap, a warning. And if you see the pattern, trust it. Now, what happens when the mirror is turned toward them? When you give gentle feedback, not to wound, but to grow, and they can't take it. When accountability is met not with reflection, but with rage. Let's move into the final sign. One that separates maturity from manipulation, strength from ego. The way someone responds to truth tells you everything. Number 6, they resist accountability or feedback. There's a sacred moment in every relationship where truth knocks. Gently, quietly, but firmly. It arrives not to shame, not to destroy, but to invite growth. It sounds like, "That hurt me," or "I felt unseen when you said that," or simply, "Can I be honest with you?" And how someone responds in that moment, how they receive your truth, reveals more about the friendship than years of shared memories ever could. Some people hear your honesty and lean in. They pause. They breathe. They may not agree, but they reflect. They ask questions. They try to understand how their words or actions landed. Even if it stings their pride, they let it land. Because to them, the bond matters more than the ego. That's how real friendships deepen. But others? They hear your truth and recoil, as if your words were a threat, as if honesty was an act of violence. Their first reflex is not to consider, but to defend, to deflect, to accuse. You say, "That made me feel small," and suddenly you're the sensitive one. You say, "That crossed a boundary," and now you're being dramatic. Their wall goes up, and beneath that wall is the quiet, rigid voice of the ego whispering, "I did nothing wrong." That's not friendship. That's emotional manipulation cloaked in fragility. And the Stoics, those quiet warriors of self-discipline, knew exactly how to confront it. Epictetus wrote, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, your peace is your responsibility, but so is your honesty. And if someone cannot handle your truth without turning it into an attack, they were never here for your growth, only their comfort. The danger with people who resist accountability is that they rewrite the story. Suddenly, your pain becomes their victimhood. Your feedback becomes their insult. And soon, you find yourself apologizing for bringing up something that hurt you. You walk away questioning your clarity. You replay the moment in your head. Did I say it wrong? Should I have stayed silent? This is how emotional confusion begins, when you start doubting the truth just to preserve the connection. But Stoicism doesn't allow that kind of self-betrayal. It teaches you to honor your inner judgment, to trust that if something felt wrong, it deserves examination. Not because you're perfect, but because awareness is the first step to any healing. And if someone isn't willing to look into the mirror you hold up, not even for a moment, then that's not your mirror to keep holding. That's not your weight to carry. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others, unless it is in relation to the common good." And feedback, real, loving, clean feedback, is for the good of both. It's not a weapon. It's a gift. It says, "I trust you enough to tell you how this felt." If they can't receive that gift without turning it into poison, you must let them go, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Real friends don't just clap for you in public. They grow with you in private. They let you hold them accountable. They let you speak your heart without making you pay a price. And yes, it might sting at first. That's the nature of truth. It pierces before it heals. But someone who values your connection will sit with that sting. They'll reflect. They'll return, even if it takes time. That's how you know it's real. Fake friends? They flee. They accuse. Or worse, they pretend to agree and then grow cold. Their inability to process feedback isn't just emotional immaturity. It's often a control mechanism. Because if they can make your truth seem like an attack, they never have to change. And if they never have to change, they get to stay in power. But love is not about control. It's about transformation. So what do? You speak your truth once, clearly, calmly, without attachment to the outcome. You say, I care enough about this friendship to tell you how I feel. And then you watch. You observe. Not just what they say, but what they do. If they attack, defend, manipulate, or ghost, the answer is there. You don't chase it. You don't beg them to grow. You simply release. Because you spoke with integrity. And that's enough. Let them go if they cannot hold space for your voice. Let them go if they cannot listen without turning your pain into a personal threat. Let them go if your evolution becomes unbearable to their ego. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. This is the sixth sign. The inability to receive feedback is not just a flaw. It's a fracture in the foundation of trust. And trust, once broken by defensiveness, rarely finds its way back through explanation. It finds its way back, if at all, through action, through humility, through accountability. And if they can't offer that, your silence will speak in a way they'll never forget. Now that we've seen all 6 truths, what do you do with them? How do you carry this wisdom forward without becoming jaded, cold, or closed? Let's bring it all together. You've made it to the end. And maybe somewhere along the way, between the silence of abandonment, the shadow of envy, the weight of one-sidedness, the mockery of your values, the poison of gossip, and the fire of rejected truth, you recognized a face. Or 2, or many. Maybe you felt that knot in your chest tighten with each sign, remembering moments when your spirit whispered, this is not love. This is survival dressed as friendship. And still you stayed. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You stayed silent to keep the peace, even while your soul fractured in the quiet. But there comes a moment in every life where you must choose peace or performance, truth or tolerance, growth or grasping. And that choice is never easy. The Stoics never promised ease. They promised clarity. They didn't teach us how to escape pain. They taught us how to face it, how to examine it, how to let it refine us instead of define us. And what you've done by simply listening, truly listening, is begin that process. You've started peeling back the layers between what feels like connection and what is. You see, fake friends are not always malicious. Some of them are simply undeveloped, people who never learned how to love beyond their own needs. But their lack of depth does not mean you must drown alongside them. Your growth is not a betrayal. Your clarity is not cruelty. Your silence is not an insult. It is a boundary, a form of grace, a signal to the universe that you are ready to stop proving your worth to those who never saw it to begin with. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the nostalgia. Let go of the version of yourself who tolerated half-hearted connections just to avoid the sting of loneliness. There is a solitude that heals, a sacred stillness where your spirit stops negotiating with people who were only ever guests in your life, but who you kept trying to build a home around. So what now? Now you breathe. You step back. You observe. You allow the people who are meant to stay to do so freely, and you no longer chase those who drift. You journal. You sit with your values. You learn to trust the tension in your chest. You stop editing your light. And slowly, you rebuild your circle with intention. Not based on history, not based on guilt, but based on energy, alignment, presence, reciprocity. Because friendship, at its truest, is not loud. It's not perfect. It's not always available. But it is safe. It is where your truth can land without being twisted. Where your silence is respected, not resented. Where your growth is welcomed, not mocked. And where your feedback is honored, not weaponized. And when you find that kind of bond, protect it. Nurture it. Give it time, space, forgiveness. But until then, walk alone with your head high. Because the Stoic walks not in fear of solitude, but in reverence of it. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Let your soul be your retreat. Let your boundaries be your home. Let your peace be your standard. And if this video reminded you of someone, or even reminded you of a version of yourself you've outgrown. Good. That's not shame. That's awakening, the beginning of discernment. And every small shift is a step toward peace and power. If this resonated with you, we invite you to stay with us, here at Stoic Now, where the silence is sacred and the wisdom is shared. Like this video if it spoke to something deep in you. Subscribe if you're walking this path with us. And leave a comment, if you'd like, about the moment you knew a friendship had turned hollow and how you chose to rise above it. Not out of anger, but out of truth. Until next time, walk with fewer, speak with less, and love with more depth. Let your calm be your clarity. Let your absence be your answer. Let your life be your proof.